Hello, hello. Uh-oh, let's see what's happened here. Hello, hello, hello. How is everyone? So glad to see everyone. Betty from Tennessee and Copper. Let's see, let me get my chat window up here. Copper's here. I'm glad you like the quilt. And Missy from Roanoke, Virginia. Welcome, welcome everybody. Hello, Betty and Christy in Indiana. Fabulous. Hi, Paula. You're in Tennessee as well. I'm so glad you ladies are here. We're going to have a fun time tonight. Thank you. Sorry about the hiccup with the scenes. So I'm still learning how to use this restreaming software. So I'm just glad to be here with you tonight. So glad. Glad to be with you. Glad to be with you. So so tonight we're going to look at Hey, hi Lois. How are you? Lois out in Delaware. Welcome. Oh, Myra. Hi, Myra. Wonderful. I'm so glad you're here. This is great. I want to share with you a quick tip right away on your cell phone. Last week, we had a tip on a phone app for needles. We downloaded the Smets needle app. How about an app for math, quilt math? I know a lot of you probably want some help with that. I know I need it sometimes when we're trying to figure out how many strips to cut for a binding. Hi, Marla. Marlene, hello. Thank you for stopping by just for a moment. I appreciate that. That's fantastic. I'm glad you were able to catch me too. Let's see. Your grandson's birthday, Copper? No, Melanie. Oh, Marlene. Okay. Hi, Sherry from Colorado. Nice to see you. So get your phones out because we're going to share another app and we're going to go to the App Store. And you know what? I forgot to check to see if it's at Google Play, but I believe it probably is. I hope that it is on Google Play for Android. I know it is for smartphones for the iPhone. So we're going to type in the phone. We're going to go to the App Store and we're going to type in Robert Kaufman. See that up there, Robert Kaufman. Robert Kaufman has a fabulous app for calculating some of the numbers we need when we make our quilts. So I've already downloaded the app. I just need to open it. So it's called a quilting calculator. It has all these calculators to help us get numbers we need for quilt math. And some of them are the back and batting measurements we need, how many pieces to cut. Hi, Maureen. Nice to see you. I'm so glad you're here. Hello. Awesome. So when you see me look down, I'm looking at the comments, or if I look off to the side, I'm trying to read the comments as we go. So binding is another thing, border yardage. This is another fantastic app. We're going to look at the binding. And so the first one, it says the width of fabric. Let's say my width of fabric is 44 inches. I like a 2-inch binding. What size binding do you like? Write it in the comments. Let me know what size binding you like to finish your quilts in. I like a 2-inch. I will go up to 2 1/4 if I use double batting, like a low loft cotton on the bottom and a wool on the top. I'll go up to 2 1/4 inches. But most of my bindings are 2 inches. So we put in 2 inches. Then we put in the quilt dimensions. Copper, you like 2 1/4 binding. Joanne, 2 1/2. Yvonne likes 2 inches. Okay, so say my quilt is 60 inches by 60 inches. So I just put in those numbers. And it says here, which is fantastic, you have 2 options, regular or bias binding. Sherry, you like 2 1/2 inch binding. So now I just hit calculate, and it tells me the length of the binding, which is 250 inches, the number of strips to cut, and how much yardage I need. Is that fantastic? I love that. So how many of you were able to download that app? Did someone find it in the Google Play Store? Those that have an Android phone? I just love it. It's fantastic. Quilt sizes. What else is on here that's really good? Pieces to, let's see, piece count. They give you all the information you need on how to use the calculator for the specific task that you need. Fantastic, Myra. I'm glad you already have it. Awesome. The name of the app, please. It's called Quilting Calculators. I'll go back to the App Store. It's Quilting Calc by Robert Kaufman. So type in Robert Kaufman up here in your search. You found it. Oh, great, Sheila. You found it at the Play Store. Wonderful. All right, just another tip for those of you who didn't know about this app. I'm glad some of you knew, like Myra. Awesome. You're welcome, Joanne. Okay, so many of you in the beginning were talking about this quilt. This is a quilt that I made when I was designed and made when I was an Island Boutique ambassador. It was a challenge to use AccuQuilt. How many of you ladies use AccuQuilt Go cutters? Do you use AccuQuilt Go cutters? Write it in the chat if you use the Go cutter. And as always, that part of the quilt process, how am I going to quilt it? And if you were with me last week, I mentioned something that I do to help me get better at quilting my projects. And I think it will help you too. And that is to pick a design, a free motion design, and Copper, oh, you use the AccuQuilt Go Cutter? Fabulous. Myra, sometimes. Thank you, Copper. I'm glad you like the quilt. I love the cutter too. It really is helpful. So I like to use a technique of stitching one pattern over and over and over again, which I mentioned last week. That way I get better at that pattern. It becomes almost like writing my signature. And so this pattern I mentioned last week that I've been practicing for the last 2 years. And if you follow my blog, you know that you'll see it in many of my quilts. And it's called bear claws. You may notice in this that most of the piecing is square, right angles, triangles. So to soften the quilt, I decided to do some circles to go beyond the piecing of the quilt and quilt some parameters for bear claws. So that's what was the first thing. And if you were here last week, I also talked about stabilizing the quilt. So for this quilt, the first thing I did was stabilize it. And stabilizing it meant that I came in first. That's right. Life's so crazy. You develop muscle memory. Exactly. And then once you stabilize the quilt and you use your stitching like echo quilting, like you see in this quilt, and the circles, you then fill in the spaces with the design. You also may notice in each of the pink squares, there are circles. Those circles were ruler quilted. Thank you. I'm glad you love. Oh, you love circles. I love circles too, Copper. Love it, love it, love it. The circles inside the pink square, it's a 4-inch square with a big 2-inch circle in the middle. Once that circle is in the middle, how much space do you have on either side? Who knows? Answer in the chat. If you have a 4-inch square and you put a 2-inch circle in it, how much space do you have all the way around? You have 1 inch. So they're 1-inch circles going all the way around that 2-inch circle. You got it, Copper. 1 inch. That's right. So that meant that those circles with a acrylic template can be stitched continuously. You stitch the 2-inch circle first and then move out and do the remaining circles all the way around. And that is accomplished with, if you know about Westalee design, they have a simple circle set where you get 1 inch, half an inch, 1 inch, at 2 inches, at 3 and 2-inch circles. And so that's the set that I used. So that's another technique on doing circles based on your patchwork size. So why did I choose circles for this pattern? And why did I choose bear claws, which is a video on my YouTube channel? You'll see me stitching it with my sit-down long arm. Often when I decide on what pattern to use in a quilt, I consider what can I do to soften all those right angles, circles, or some curved design. And so that's why I chose circles, also because I love circles. Does anyone have any questions about this quilt before I move on to the next project? Let's see, I'm going to look at some of the questions and comments. All right. I don't see anyone with any questions, so then I will move on to the next thing, because one of the things that I want us to talk about, and I know a lot of us struggle with, including me, I can learn a lot of free motion quilting designs, but how do I transfer those designs from a practice piece to an actual quilt? Well, thank you, Copper. I'm glad the circles are striking. Yeah, thank you. Let's see, more questions. So I want to show you another way in which to improve your selection of quilting patterns for your projects. And I mentioned, I think last week, that I like to use orphan blocks or quilt panels to practice. Going to be practicing bear claws. It's a fabulous design. Maybe I should show you real quick. You'll see it. It's a demo. It's one of my earlier videos, so I really didn't show how to do it by hand, but I'll show you here today. It's really just a back and forth. So I go back and forth with a point, back and forth. You see how that's a bear claw, back and forth? Let me get my eraser. So what I'll do is I'll create a square. And if I'm starting in a corner, I will do that back and forth. Now I can switch direction and always hitting the end. You see how that's a bear claw, and I can decide how many repeats I want to fill the space. So I do that again. And then I just fill that space, just going back and forth. And then change direction. It's important to change direction. Whoops, sorry. Can you see that? Is that better? All right. I hope everyone was able to see that. I'm sorry if the camera was too low. I can do that one more time. Would you like me to demo that one more time? Let me know. I'm going to read the comments, chat. Okay. All right. I'll do it one more time, just in case, because I realized I was outside the camera view. So bear claw is just back and forth. And you can repeat as many times as you want. Then you change direction. What's neat about this design is that you can change the scale of it and make it bigger, or you can make it smaller. So here I'll go small. You see the difference when going big and small? It's a wonderful design that you can use in almost any quilt. Okay. All right, so I did demo again. That was twice. Do I need to do it a third time? 3 times? There's a little lag with the streaming, so you might be answering and I haven't seen it come up yet. I will move on to the next example. Good. Okay, Sherry. Good. Got it. All good. Wonderful. All right. So here is another example. Remember, we can use an orphan block or we can use a quilt panel, small projects before we move to the bigger ones. But eventually, ladies, you got to use it in the big quilt. But here is an example where I decided, just like always, I had to stabilize. How am I going to do that? Often I want to stabilize by putting in lines and sections where I'm going to fill that section with ruler quilting or free motion quilting. So here's the star. I did some echo quilting. This is a star block by Fat Quarter Shop. I participated in one of their quilt alongs, and this is one of their stars. I hope that the back number I want to help. Yeah, that's right, Copper. The bear claw, you can get around any shape, any area very quickly and easily because you can go in any direction. It's a very easy and forgiving design. So here it is stabilized. I started doing the echoes. And how many echoes do you think we should do in any given project? How many echoes would you want to put in this star? Put a number in the chat. If we want to emphasize the star, how many echoes would help do that? Should the whole thing be echoed or half of it be echoed? That's why we do these smaller projects, because we can experiment, go back and forth. So how many echoes? Minimum of 2. Okay, so far there are 2 echoes. 1, 2. Well, actually, there are 3 because I did a stitch along the very edge, which you can't see. It's along the seam, near the seam of the star. That helps to lay that anchor the star. But the echoes that you can see in terms of stitching, there's 2. Okay, Sharon, you say 2 or 3 echoes. Now, if I left it as it is now, once I start to fill in this star, that very last echo would not be as pronounced. It would not be as pronounced. I would have to add another one so that you get a sense that there's more than, that there's actually 2 echoes. So I'm going to go to the next slide and tell me what you think in the chat. What do you think about those echoes? Suzanne, yes, we're going to have some great Q&A time, and I'm going to talk about some of my fabric prep. If you looked at the previous slide, that fabric was laying pretty nice and flat, not a lot of wrinkles, and that is because I do use starch. I mix my own starch solution. So look at all those echoes, how much those echoes make that star shine. It emphasizes the star. But that may not be your goal. You may not want that many, but maybe you do. But it is, I think, a very good way of accenting the star. And then the center, I chose a very tight stipple. Stippling is one of the first designs we learn when we're free motion quilting. And it's something that you will use forever because it's a fantastic filler design. Did you notice how many echoes are on the outside of the star? You see the difference between the number of echoes inside and outside the star? What a difference. Yes, Melissa. Yep. Just another way. Also, notice that the echo on the inside are 1/4 inch and the echo on the outside is 1/2 inch. Why do you think we would do that? Why would we go with 1/2 inch of echo on the outside? There's a 1/4 inch first and then a 1/2 inch stitching echo or on the outside. Can you see the size variance and how that helps to define the space for the star? More detail on the inside, says Melissa. Yep, the inside, it brings your eye right to it. To offset it from the center. Yes, Myra, that's a very good observation. Yes, Sharon, it breaks it up from the background. It really makes the star move forward, even though there's a lot of texture in the background, having that half-inch echo helps the star separate itself from the background. Good observation. Yeah, Life's So Crazy. Yep. It enlarged the star also. Yep, exactly. So now, are you learning some techniques on some of the things that you can do with your quilting? If we go back to see how Bear Claw is quilted here in this project, you see the difference between circles with no echo. That star had a lot of echo, and the Bear Claw was a nice addition to the star, but the star was still center stage. And here, Bear Claw just has a lot of surface texture. And basically, it's almost edge to edge, but we did put in some echo quilting around some of the shapes. But the only way we can see the difference is if we practice. Sharon says, breaks up the background. I'm going to read some of the comments, ladies. Copper, you feel like you're in school in the best sense of the word. Oh, fantastic. You're learning. I hope everybody's taking notes who wants to, because if you're like me, I forget it. What type of batting? Good question. You may notice that on this quilt, it's relatively flat. It doesn't have as much texture as the star. Let's go back to the star. Look at the edge of the star block. There's a border, and then beyond that, you can see my batting. This is a 2 batting quilt project. It's a 1 block with a border, and I used thin cotton on the bottom and wool on the top. How did I do the large circles? The large circles, I used Westalee design templates to do the large circles on the first quilt. All right, folks, there's my brother. All right, Arrington Strickland, thank you for showing up. Awesome, there's my brother. Love you. Is there a reason why you can't use wool layer with no cotton? No, there isn't. The reason why I like to use, sometimes I just use wool only, and I'm going to show you a quilt that was wool only, and you'll see a little bit of the difference. But often I will use the thin layer of cotton on the back to give the quilt some stability, to make it a little bit rigid. And that often is because I'm making quilts that are going to go on the wall, or they're going to be in a quilt show, or I'm sending them to a magazine. It just depends on what your purpose is for the quilt. Hello, Elta. So glad you can make it. What, your sister attended one of my classes? Fantastic. Oh, wonderful. Okay, so I think we're done here. Any more questions on how I am using Bear Claw over and over in a project? Here is that example that I told you about. This is a quilt that was just published in Quick and Easy Quilts. It's the February-March issue of this year. And I designed this quilt called A Star Has Arrived. And what free motion quilting pattern do you see? There's bear claws right there. Do I pre-mark? Most often, the answer is no. I don't have time. I will pre-mark depending upon the project. I try to minimize how much I have to mark. I like to use a technique where I create borders and boundaries. After I pick a design, I create borders and boundaries like the circle that you saw. It didn't require any marking. I just chose the circle that would fit around those three triangles. I'll go back. So the circles there, I just picked the right size circle to go around those three squares. So I didn't have to mark. Then the echo quilting around the neighboring block, no marking required because I was doing a 1/4 inch echo. So no marking required. Same thing here. No marking required because I'm using the piecing for the echoing to create boundaries to put in the free motion quilting. The less time that I have to mark, the easier it is for me. And I think I've been able to develop a system where I do very little marking because I use the piecing or space within the piecing to create the border and boundary for the quilting. Hey, there's my sister Cookie. Hey, I'm so glad you're here. Oh, love it, love it, love it. Okay, so let's go back. This is A Star Has Arrived, and this is the project where I only used wool batting. No cotton batting on the bottom because it's a baby quilt. And for the bear claw design, I did the scale big because I wanted the quilt to be soft and cuddly. So it's big bear claws. The scale is very big. Hey, Suzanne. You're welcome. You're welcome. Great. And if you do get the magazine, I would love to know if you just how you decide to quilt it. The pattern is not shared in the magazine, but you know that there's a video and you can practice bear claws if you want. I don't know if you can see behind the magazine how I framed the star to create the areas for the bear claw free motion quilting. All right, so again, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is that whether it's bear claw or another design, you want to practice it over and over. You want to change the scale. You want to put it in different places in the quilt. You want to see how it works. You saw bear claw in that first quilt where it was in the circle and a square. You saw how I used it as a background design on the star. And now you're seeing it here where it's all over, but again, there's some big echo quilting around the star because the idea was the stitching should be big so that the quilt wouldn't be too stiff, but nice, soft, and cuddly. Okay, circle quilt pattern. I'm not sure what you're asking, Sharon. Hello. Ladybird, hi. I'm so glad you're going to get the magazine. Awesome. Okay, we're going to go to tool time. Tool time. Last week we talked about needles, right? A little bit about needles. We got the needle app. Another thing I want to share with you, part of our success, it comes from having the right tools. And if you've taken a class with me before, I always say you can use a screwdriver to hammer a nail, but why? Use a hammer, right? Let's have the right tools, the tools for success. And mainly, you have to experiment. I can recommend a tool that I've used and I like, And I've tested a lot of them, but ultimately you have to test too. And that comes with needles. I recommend and like Smets needles and Superior Threads top stitch needles. I've had fantastic success using them on my Janome machines. I have a Janome 7700 and I love that machine. That's the machine that you see in my videos. And I want you to begin to learn, if you haven't already, to learn about needles. And so I just want to take you to the Superior Threads website. How many of you know about Superior Threads? Let me know in the chat. Whoa, we want to do that. Okay. So if you know about Superior Threads, let me know. I do not have the pattern available, Sharon. That was something I designed for as a Island Boutique Ambassador project. And so I haven't written the pattern. I have a long list of patterns that I need to write that I haven't written yet. Okay, Life's So Crazy. You like to use some of Superior Threads thread. Yep, I like their threads too. I use Bottom Line. We're going to have another session where we talk about thread, but you use Superior Thread needles. Fabulous. And Lois, you use Superior Thread. Fantastic. Do you ladies know about their education section? If you don't, or if you haven't visited in a long time, then you need to go back and refresh and remember why you use, what needles you use, or learn about needles. They have a fantastic education section, threads, needles, bobbins, all kinds of things. This week, we're talking about needles. And so they have a needle guide. Their needles are titanium coated. They're not made of titanium. They are coated with titanium that makes them last longer. And they have, let's see, needle guide. Using the right needle, how important is that? What are the different types of needle points? Universal needle is that needle that has kind of a rounded tip. It's not very pointy so that it could separate fibers. Oh, you like kimono silk threads. Yes. King Tut for top stitching. Fabulous. I'm so glad you ladies have decided to learn about thread and needles, and you're using what works for you to give you the results that you need. That's so important. So I just wanted to remind everyone. Oh, and you like Bob's tips. Yep. Fantastic. Well, don't be embarrassed about that. That's okay. We do what we can. That thankfully, they're still around and you can still get a lot of information. And then they have charts, which is nice. And for those of you who are long arm quilters, there's also needles on here for long arm quilters. I have a sit down, so I do get their needles, Gross Beckert needles. Learn about thread and needles, ladies. The more you know, the more you'll be able to use the tools for success so that you can be successful. All right, I'm going to try something different here. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can get the chat in my window. Let's see if that will work. Get that chat up there. Let's see. Is that working? No, let's see. All right, let me try this with something else. Just your patience for a minute. Restream chat. There we go. That's not coming in. Let's see. Okay. Trash that. Save. All right. Here we go. I'm still trying to get that chat window up. I'm doing this for the first time, ladies. So just your patience for just a quick minute. Can I undo that? Nope. Oh, unlock scene. That's it. Okay. Let me try it again. No, that's not working. Let's see. All right, let's see. Hopefully that's it. Okay, let's see if that's going to work. Not really a question, just trying. All right, yay, it's working. All right, fabulous. Okay, so Lady Bird, the top stitch needle that I use is from Superior Threads, and the size depends on the thread that you're using. Let's see. So it's a top stitch needle. I use glide thread often, and I use a 9014 with glide. If I'm using 50 weight thread, I'll use an 8012 needle, but always the top stitch needle by Superior Threads. All right, so hopefully sisters think alike. All right, so the chat is finally working. Yay. Let's see, what other questions did I miss from before? Any more questions about how to get your quilt design from practice to a quilt? Someone did ask about, can you tell the difference between superior needles and smudge needles? Are you talking about the difference between stitch quality or the physical difference? We know that smudge needles has the color coding. And of course, you would have to compare the same thing because Smets also makes top stitch needles. So you would compare a superior thread top stitch to a Smets top stitch needle. I would just compare them and see what happens. Look at the stitch quality, see how long they last. Yes, I like so fine thread. Generally, I use 40, 50, and 60 weight threads. I use 60 weight thread bottom line by Superior in the bobbin, and I'll use So Fine on the top when I want to do a lot of quilting, but I don't want the thread to be noticeable. I want it to be a lightweight in terms of texture. I will use a finer thread because 40 weight is a very heavy thread, and if you have a design with a lot of repeats, the thread buildup can be too much. Do you prefer one brand over the other? I like to use what works, and I like to use quality thread. I have been using Glide, and I've used Isocord thread and Summer Superior Superior threads. I've used their Magnifico, Fantastico. I like those too. They're just high quality threads. And what is high quality? Low lint. And what causes us to have a lot of lint? And that's the staple. And staple is the length of the strands. If the staple is short, that means you need more strands, and there's a lot of starts and stops when they make the thread. That, and as a result, you get a lot of lint. If it's long staple with 3 strands, it's stronger and less lint. What weight thread do you use for micro stippling? I used 60 weight thread. 60 weight thread. Okay. Any other questions? Move this down a little bit. What weight of thread do you use for micro stippling? I answered that one. What else can I answer? All right, so I was talking about how to get from your practice to your quilt. And that often is done with a plan. And what is the plan? Choosing a design, then deciding how you're going to put the design in a quilt by creating borders and boundaries. And do you do that with echo quilting around the piecing design, or do you create your own border and boundary? And when I say border and boundary, I'm talking about, if this is your quilt, you can create, let's see, is that better? You can do edge to edge, and that's your border and your boundaries. And so you can start anywhere. Or you can divide a quilt into sections and quilt each section like that, completely ignoring the piecing. Do you like 60 weight thread or 80 weight? Does it make a difference in piecing? I generally use 50 weight, but a lot of people like to use 60 weight. I think you have to decide for yourself. You would test what works for you, what foot you're using to piece. And I think someone asked earlier about quilt preparation and starch. One of the challenges that we face in free motion quilting on our domestic machine is fabric movement. And so you want to do everything you can to minimize fabric movement. So that's why I pre-wash, one reason, and I starch my fabric, and I mix with Stay Flow. And that helps to keep the fabric fibers from shifting, and the quilt as a whole, the piece blocks from shifting as I quilt. 60 weight thread in the bobbin when using 50 weight on the top. Yes, I do that too. I often will use 60 weight in the bobbin and use 50 and 40 weight thread as a top thread. So we create borders and boundaries for our quilts, and we can do that based on just the dimensions of the whole quilt, or we can do it based on the piecing. Sometimes what I'll do is that ignore the piecing, and I will do some zigzags to break up the quilt. And then I'll stitch in this pattern, whatever filler design I want. That helps us on a domestic machine to break up and quilt our quilt in sections. Okay, ladies, do we have any more questions? We're almost at an hour. Thank you for spending your time with me. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. Any more questions? Let's see. They should be still coming through. All right. You're welcome, Copper. You're very welcome. I'm so glad that you could join again. And I'm glad you made it too. Life's so crazy. It is. Marla, wonderful. You're welcome, Sharon. Thank you for coming and being here with us tonight. It's almost 8 o'clock here on the East Coast, still early for some of you on the West Coast. What else? So next week, I haven't decided what we're going to cover, but if there's something that you would like to talk about in our quilt conversations, don't hesitate to send me an email at dina@livingwaterquilter.com and or leave it in the comment section of YouTube or Facebook. And thank you for all of you who are on Facebook and YouTube. It's glad to be able to go live in both places. You're welcome, Sheila. So glad you could be here. Lots of information. Hopefully it wasn't information overload. I'm trying to base these chat sessions on some of the questions that you ask in videos when you watch the video and leave a comment. Maureen, yes, you do. You got to get started and finish that quilt. Oh, fantastic. I need those alarms too. I'm going to thank you, Maureen. I appreciate that. I miss you. It's been so long since we've seen each other. I hope all of you have a wonderful and safe weekend, that you find time to do something that gives you rest and peace. And if that means you can get a chance to sew, I hope that that will happen for you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you so much for allowing me to share some of the things that I love to do with you. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And I think we need to do a little confetti. Yeah? How about some confetti? See you next Friday. See you next Friday. Bye now. Happy quilting.